but you put it under control to do good instead of doing evil with it. We also saw the importance of blessed are the peacemakers, and obviously, first and foremost, that's the gospelers, those that share the good news of the Lord, but also for those that do make peace with others, for those that reconcile situations. And blessed are you when you're persecuted for righteousness' sake. And one of the problems, not a problem, one of the things we're going to see is a lot of the passages that we will look at that talk about relationship to evil or to using violence and force have to do with persecution. They're in the context of Jesus telling his followers what to do when persecuted. And so persecuted may not be the same when the answer to persecution and the answer to a thief in your house may not be the same, is what I'm saying, but we need to at least look at what he says to those that are persecuted for righteousness' sake as a foundation. And then the other one we looked at where we left off last week was to love your enemy and to give to the one who asks and do not withhold from the one who wants it, and all these other things that it said in that passage about, again, responding to those that were the enemy and going the second mile. Someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them, take them the second mile. And so we looked at all that. Any comments or questions from what we said last week about those elements? Well, this week, I would like you to turn to Acts chapter 7 and be reminded, if you're familiar with, if not, to know what happened there in Acts chapter 7 with Stephen, one of the first deacons of the church, and the high priest arrested them, and this is Acts chapter 7, and the whole chapter is to deal with this. And actually, starts at chapter 6, verse 8. Now Stephen, a man full, this is chapter 6, verse 8. Now Stephen, a man full of grace and power, performed great wonders and signs among the people. Opposition arose, however, from members of the synagogue of the freemen, as it was called, Jews of Cyrene and Alexandria, as well as the provinces of Cilicia and Asia, who began to argue with Stephen. So they get in this argument, but they could not stand up against the wisdom and the spirit that Spirit gave him as he spoke. So then they secretly persuaded some men to say, we've heard Stephen speak blasphemous words against Moses and against God. So how was he treated here? What happened here? They were falsely accusing him, weren't they? They lied about what happened. They were falsely accusing him. And so they stirred up the people and the elders and the teachers of the law, and they seized Stephen and brought him before the Sanhedrin. So he's being falsely arrested, falsely accused, and falsely held on trial before the Sanhedrin. All right? The Sanhedrin was the Jewish council made up of Pharisees and Sadducees and the teachers of the law and scribes. They produced false witnesses who testified. So it wasn't something that was even a true accusation. The people that were accusing him produced the false witnesses who testified against him. This fellow never stopped speaking against this holy place and against the law. We've heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth will destroy this place and change the customs Moses handed down to us. So they really, put it heavy against him. He had all these false accusations. But when they argued with him and they talked to him, they found out that they couldn't stand up to his wisdom and his attitude. And so he tells them about the history of what God was doing with the Jews. And that's all the way through chapter 7. And he gets down through chapter 7. And as he's going through, he every once in a while says, but you, and you did these things wrong, you did these things wrong. And eventually, he gets down to verse 51. Look at verse 51 of chapter 7. You stiff-necked people, your hearts and ears are still uncircumcised. You are just like your ancestors. So his speech sounds harsh, but it was true. It was the truth. You always resist the Holy Spirit. Was there ever a prophet your ancestors did not persecute? They even killed those who predicted the coming of the righteous one. And now you have betrayed and murdered him. Speaking of Jesus, right? He's telling them, you have murdered. What is he doing when he said that to them? What did he just do for himself? Huh? What did he just do for himself when he said that?
Speaking up for himself.
Well, he's doing more than he's speaking for the Lord. But what did he do what was he doing for himself when he said that? He was guaranteeing that they were now going to do what? Kill him. He was guaranteeing that they were now going to kill him because he said, you murdered Jesus. And they're not going to put up with that. And so he said, they even kill those who... and now you have betrayed and murdered him. In verse 53, you have received the law that was given through angels, but have not obeyed it. So now he's accusing them of not obeying the law. And when the members of the Sanhedrin heard this, they were furious and they gnashed their teeth at him. What does it look like when somebody gnashes their teeth at you? I don't know what that looks like.
Like a dog, I guess.
You gotta rub your teeth back and forth. They gnashed their teeth, and that's how mad they were. But Stephen, full of the Holy Spirit, looked up to heaven and saw the glory of God and Jesus stand to the right hand of God. God gave him this wonderful vision as he was true to the Lord and faithful to God. And then he said, he secures his doom right here. He says, look, I see heaven open and the Son of Man standing at the right hand of God. And at this, they covered their ears, and yelling at the top of their voices, they all rushed him, dragged him out of the city, and began to stone him. Meanwhile, the witnesses laid their coats at the feet of the young man named Saul, where he enters the story now. And while they were stoning him, Stephen cursed at them. No, that's not what Stephen did. While they were stoning him, Stephen prayed, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit. Then he fell on his knees and cried out, Lord, do not hold this sin against them. When he had said this, he fell asleep. That means he dies. Now, when he says, don't hold this sin against him, who was he following in that example? Jesus. The Lord, when Jesus was on the cross, right? Yeah. When he was being crucified, and the soldiers who were responsible for performing the crucifixion, they didn't do the voting and they didn't do the decision, but they're the ones who had to carry it out. And so Jesus says to the Father, forgive them, they don't know what they're doing. An attitude of forgiveness. And so the point, I think, to learn from some of these things with Stephen here is to learn about stand up for the truth, present the truth, and in his situation, because of who had arrested him, he's now subject to a trial, and it was a fake trial, false witnesses. But knowing that the outcome is going to be, he still went ahead and said the truth, knowing the outcome, which is pretty courageous of the young man. And,
was there any neutral people, Pastor, that was able to, that Stephen could be, a witness to? That,
know
how honest that he was?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
It
just says he was he was before the Sanhedrin, so I don't know.
Okay.
If others were gathered or not.
Yeah.
Let's look over 2 Corinthians 10:4. Now, hopefully, pretty soon we're going to be able to put all this together and try to talk about it. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4. Paul makes a statement here in the context of defense for the ministry, and he is defending himself, which he often did not do. He's defending himself verbally against his accusers in Corinth. And I'll begin with verse 1. By the humility and the gentleness of Christ, I appeal to you, I, Paul, who am timid when face to face with you, but bold toward you when away. That's sarcasm. It's complete sarcasm. I beg you that when I come, I may have to be as bold as I expect to be toward some people who think that we live by the standards of this world. For though we live in the world, and here's the thing to pick up. Though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons, he's not talking about we nations, he's talking about we believers. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is, and we will, I can't even read this morning, and we will be ready to punish every act of disobedience once your obedience is complete. Now, he mentioned something in the context of talking to other believers, and they were accusing him of not being a true apostle, and that when he's face to face, he's timid, but in his letters, he's very bold and says things he would never say to our face, and things like that. What's his response to that accusation? What is his retort? What does he say?
God must be the commander in chief.
That's if you just kind of stick to the text and read some of the things that it says there. He talks about some people who think that we live by the standards of this world, and he responds to that. What worldly standards doesn't he live according to in verses 3 and 4? What standards?
We do not wage war as humans.
I don't wage war as the world does. As the world does. Laura? You saying that or something else?
Are you asking what? Can you what is exactly your question?
Yeah. What is his response to the accusations of him being not a true apostle, and that he's very timid when amongst them, but bold when away in his letters,
right.
And they're looking for a fight.
Right.
Right? They're basically trying to pick a fight with him. And what's his response to their accusations against him, Laura?
He says that you're thinking about the fight in the wrong way.
I think so.
And that Christians are to use spiritual weapons when it comes to arguing with the world. He also says that we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God.
Right.
So this is...
He brings it back to the scripture.
This is a lot about what people think is how we destroy the strongholds of the world.
Well, our weapons will destroy those strongholds. History. My mind is just a bunch of mush today, but help me out. In history, who was it that said that they feared more Christians on their knees than all the armies of the world? There was a military leader that said that. Anybody know? Maybe I don't have my Googler here. Who is it that normally Googles for me? You want to try it, Craig? Sure. See if you can come up with it. But the reality is that our weapons are very powerful as believers. And church history has taught this throughout centuries. And our weapons are not, but they're not the weapons of this world. Where are our weapons?
The Word of God.
Word of God.
The Word of God.
The Word of Spirit.
The Word of God, the Sword of Spirit. What are our weapons? Prayer. Prayer is a mighty weapon that Christians have, right?
Faith.
The truth of God, the testimony of God, right?
Bible.
God's Holy Spirit's power. These are the things that we wage war with as we pray for things and as we testify. Even martyrdom became one of the most powerful weapons in converting unbelievers to Christ. Christian martyrdom became a powerful weapon.
Using the full armor of God, effectively.
Yep. I think there's a connection problem here, guys. Yo, anybody in the booth? I think we got a connection problem.
Why, you hear it again?
I hear it ticking as I move. Hear that? I'm going to turn this off for now, okay?
Okay.
We'll look at it a little later. There you go. Yeah, definitely no problem.
There was, PJ,
Yes.
there was something attributed to the Queen of Scotland.
Yes.
I fear the prayers of John Knox more than all the armies of England.
Yeah, there you go.
Amen.
That was the one. Yeah. I had some of it.
1572.
It was prayer anyway. Yeah, right. It was the Queen of England. That's who it was, right?
What did Scotland?
Of Scotland. Yeah.
What did she say again?
I fear the prayers of John Knox more than all the armies of England.
John Knox was a famous Puritan pastor.
Yeah, I know that.
That's pretty good. Well, he says that the weapons that we are to fight with are not the weapons of the world. This is a I don't like using the word principle because the Bible doesn't use that word. This is a truth that helps us to understand that where our mind should first go is not in response to where the world is. And if people are making accusations and throwing things at you to try to get you into that fight, he says our weapons are not of the world. We don't fight as the world does. We use the Spirit of God and wisdom and the Scriptures, and we use love, and we use compassion, and we use all these kinds of things, the meekness, power under control, do good for evil. We use the things that Jesus taught us as our weapons. These are our weapons as believers, as individual believers. Now, and that they have great power to do many things. So that's one point. Now, here's another in 2 Corinthians chapter 11. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul continues by defending his position as an apostle and what he suffered for Christ's name, the things that he suffered for Christ's name. And in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, and we're just going to jump into the middle of his argument about all the kinds of things that he went through. Look with me at verse 23. He talks about the Jews. Are they servants of Christ? I'm out of my mind to talk about this, but I am more. I have worked much harder. I've been in prison more frequently. Now, why was he put in prison? Did he steal? No. Why did he get put in prison? For what? For being a Christian. For being a Christian. He was put in prison for his faith. I've been put in prison more frequently. I've been flogged more severely. What is it to be flogged? Beaten with the 39 stripes, 40 minus 1, the 39 stripes. He said, with the cattail thing, with the shards and the thing. He says, I've been flogged more severely. So he's actually had to be physically hurt because of being a Christian. And I've been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 5 times. That's 196 lashes. Imagine what his scars on his back must have looked like. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Now they really hurt when you get caned with beaten with a cane or a rod. Once I was pelted with stones, which there's one example in Acts where they stoned him and left him for dead, and then after they walked away, they uncovered the stones, and he gets up and God protected him and walks away, right? 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I have constantly been on the move. I've been in danger from rivers. And then this is the next one. I've been in danger from bandits. This is the only one there that's really not a result of him being a Christian. The other things were because of being a Christian and Christian ministry. But when he was traveling throughout the churches and going back and forth, this is long distance, and they're through mountains and all kinds of topography and stuff. Any traveler on that road is in danger of what? Of the bandits. So this didn't happen because of him being a Christian. This happened because he was traveling. Now, the reason for traveling was a Christian. He was doing the Lord's work and ministry, and that's why he was traveling. But he says, but I was in danger from bandits. I'm holding on to that a little bit. Because that's my one claim to say his attitude towards what to do was not only because of being persecuted as a believer, but because of a general attitude of what do you do to avoid evil or what are we talking about?
Violence?
Thank you. Violence. Thank you, Craig. Oh, man, I tell you, this is Moist City today. Violence and things like this. What do we do to in the face of those things? Now, when he was confronted by bandits while traveling, he didn't have any weapons to defend himself. And if he did have a sword of some sort or a dagger, it was to cut the wood, remember? But he doesn't use it to defend himself against the bandits. He runs. He runs from them, as we'll see in other places where they were taught to flee. In danger from my fellow Jews, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, in danger from false believers. I have labored in toil. He's talking about all these things. And his attitude towards them is not what our attitude by nature wants to be. I guess that's the point I want to make. My attitude in facing danger or violence or defending myself, whether it's an argument or whether it's physical, is to stand in there first myself and defend myself. Whereas Paul, his situation is more of, I'm going to glorify God. I'm going to glorify God. And whatever he's calling me to do, I trust in him and his sovereignty and his providence. I'm going to glorify God in this matter. So, my bottom line is this. I think that in all circumstances involving violence, the first thing that we have to remember is that love is stronger than fear. Love is stronger than fear. Don't give in to fear. Don't give in to the fear of dying, because they can't take away your soul. That's the first bottom line. Don't give in to fear. Secondly, may my response and my actions glorify God. May they glorify God. What does that mean in every situation? I don't know. You're going to have to try to discern that yourself. But I am confident with those two things. How does that work out practically? I throw it open to you. So, we're going to start with Darlene's question. What do you do if a burglar comes into your house and they got a weapon and you've got your family and your children there or something like this? What do you do? What do you do to protect yourself? Or how do you protect yourself, or what do you do? So that was her question, right, Darlene?
It was, but I mean, not just somebody that wants to rob your house. I'm talking about...
Do you bodily harm?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
They want to hurt you. What do we do?
Pray.
Am I going to take the first stab?
Pray.
Pray, first of all. That's a good start there. To pray. That's a good start. And I would pray out loud so they might hear me praying for them.
Call out the name of Jesus and it might say,
Yeah, it might stop. It might, yeah. In the name of Jesus.
It's not just hurting us, I'm talking about little children.
Everybody, I understand the whole deal. You know, because these are so hypothetical, and the reason I say that is, have you ever had that happen to
No.
you? And I haven't either, and I know very, very few, if anybody, that has ever had it happen. But it does happen sometimes. I mean, it does occur. And so we want to prepare ourselves and think about that, you know. Well, what if it should happen to me? What if it should come to my house? Kind of thing. So, to me, the first thing to do is not to fear dying myself. So I think, and I'm going to answer for me first, and then we'll throw ours out. I think I would try to do my best to stay in front of my family and try to use my strength that God has given me to stop them from hurting my family. That's what I think I would do. Am I glorifying God in doing that? I'm not sure. I'm being honest with you. I'm not sure.
Why not?
Because I don't know if he really wants me to use my strength and hurting them, trying to hurt them, or should I just... Well, here's the first thing I would do. If I would get out of the house if possible. I'd run if possible. That's the first thing, is to run. But if you can't run, what do you do? But I would try to flee. I think that's the first response. I would try to flee. Secondly, I think I would try to protect my family from them, and that means do my best to disarm them and restrain them if I could. And I might end up dying in the process, and then if I die, it's next soldier up in the family. It's the wife protecting the children or whatever. I don't know. It's a hard hypothetical to answer because I haven't been put in that situation ever before.
It's hard to say because one night I thought I had left the sliding doors open and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning and I really thought someone was coming in that way. And every nerve in my body and everything that was in my head, I can't tell you how I was overcome. I don't think I would have the presence of mind to pray.
You raising your hand?
No.
Oh, okay. I thought Ryan was like that. I also would try my best to dial 911 right away if you had an opportunity. You know, dial, get the police involved as soon as possible.
I think,
Go ahead.
I think you'll know what to do when the time comes.
That's a pretty good answer.
Because how can you plan for something like that? You know, you keep your
Some
home
people.
safe, you teach your children certain things and all this. But I just believe that.
I know many Christians, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying I know many Christians who have weapons for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And if they were to have, if they hear somebody coming in, they're going to, the first move is to get the weapon. A lot of burglars, a lot of people intending harm has left when they've heard a pump shotgun pump.
Yeah.
It's an amazing sound when they're silent.
I think ever since.
But I don't have a gun. But I do know many Christians that would say that their first move is to get a gun and defend their family and their property.
We were robbed at one time. My house was vandalized and robbed.
Were you home?
No, I was going to say, see, God, with the children, nobody was home. So I just think that God you'll know what to do.
Maureen went through that. She
Very
and
upset.
Harold were robbed one time.
Yeah.
They were home, but it was
Came
terrible.
home and the doors were open, everything was open. It took
It's got to be a terrible thing.
It's an awful feeling, but we weren't there.
Okay, good. Take Jonathan, and I'll go over to Tom. Jonathan?
It seems to me that the law has wisdom for us here, right? Like the secular law has some wisdom for us here. Because I know it varies from state to state, but usually you have to retreat if you're able, right? If you can get out of bed, you should, right?
Flee,
Yep.
retreat,
Right.
hide.
Right, some states you don't have to, but most you do, and then after that you have to use the minimum necessary force, right? So don't kill them if you don't have to, right? Warn them first if you're able and if it's safe to say, I have a gun, leave my house, right? And So you're not out for vengeance or trying to hurt anybody if you don't have to. It seems to me like the secular law there is a helpful guide.
I struggle with taking a weapon and using it against someone. I don't know if that glorifies God, for me personally.
Pastor, if I may.
You're next in line. Hold on. I got Tommy then. Tommy?
No, I was just thinking to not use weapons and probably be a little bit more, maybe call authority. I don't know.
Yeah,
The first thing I was thinking was obviously everybody has a gun in their house and they're going to grab a gun and shoot somebody, but that's probably what will happen if you're put in that situation. But I think the right thing would be probably is to try to avoid the situation or try to diffuse it as much as you can without killing them. But if you have to do what you got to do, you have to do it.
okay.
To follow
Right.
with Jonathan, especially in states like New Jersey, there is a flee first. So I would ultimately agree with that.
Flee first.
Flee first. At some point, and I think even as a Christian, you may have to look at is, are you defending or becoming an aggressor with what you're doing? So, yeah, if you flee to go get a weapon, are you thinking, well, I'm going to grab it and use it, or are you going to grab it and hold your ground to make sure nothing happens to your family? So there's some...
And I appreciate you adding that in. You're right. I've had discussions with Christians, some even family, that would you use a gun to defend property as well as life, or only property, or only life, or what would you do? And some of them have said they would use a gun to defend property. They would kill somebody to defend their property.
I think from my own perspective, like, property is property, my family is something different.
I think from a biblical perspective, and this was my argument to the person who's a Christian, my argument was, is it worth taking a life because of any possession you have, including your house?
I just feel like my immediate family.
Because Sermon on the Mount says, turn the other cheek, give to the one that asks for you. Here, if you want it, take it. I'll even help you load it up. I'm not going to call the police experts, but I don't think a Christian should ever be concerned with violence to defend property. And fleeing is always first. Right?
Sitting in the comfortableness of the church and the pew.
Oh man, comfortable pews too. Boy.
I'm going to tell you one thing, or say one thing, but I'm not sure I would react that way. To me, the first thing to do is to live in the context of a God-centered life. And then the second thing is what Angie was saying. I think God will tell us what to do and give us both the presence of mind, but also the peace to be able to react the way He wants us to react.
I think that's excellent, Jay.
Yeah.
I think that's excellent. Did everybody hear what he just said? I think that's
We still have to
excellent.
decide in advance whether
Now, I'm practical, and I'm just wondering the logistics of Darlene's example. Say you did have children in the house. You'd have to be locking this gun away. By the time you would figure out where your key is, get into wherever you locked it, you could be dead.
Well,
So what's the point? I guess that's
some of them don't lock them away that tight.
Yeah, you know what I mean? But if you had a little kid, you would hope that they would.
You give it out of the safe.
Well, I wish all gun owners put their guns in safes, but some of them keep them in their drawers, their dresser drawer. I like what Jay had to say because I think it brought in what we've been learning from the scriptures so far. And I like what Angie had to say with, God's going to show me at that moment what to do. I think that the things that we should definitely know is what even the law says, which is flee. If possible, flee.
What do you mean by that law?
Get out of the house. The law of the townships, not the law. Their suggested things to do is, if you have a burglar, don't stand and fight. Is get out of the house. If you see somebody with a gun, get out if you can. Don't bother in front of
And if you've done everything you possibly could, the next thought in my mind would be, well, if I'm going to be absent from the body, but
present with the Lord. See, to me, that's the bottom line always is,
yes,
don't fear what men fear. So
right.
that's not the thing I need to be afraid of.
I'm going to see him next. So.
Go ahead, Evelyn.
I know in Virginia it's flee 2, But we had some problems at the house with my son being a skateboarder and some of his friends coming at the house. And the police officer told him that he was even to go out a window if he could, than to shoot somebody.
And that's good because Virginia's laws with gun laws are pretty lax.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, you have revealed carry.
But in Newport News, the city,
Yeah.
it's like New York City versus the state of New York. They have their own laws in the city, and they're a lot stricter.
Yeah, these things are important to think through. I mean, Bill, he's been biting his tongue for a long while. Go ahead, Bill.
From past Sunday school lessons, I can always remember you talking about the difference between government and how they react and personal responsibility. So we're sitting here in the church right now, okay? And someone comes in. Who is the government here? Are the leaders the government?
No.
So we're to let them do what they're going to do.
What do you mean, let them do what they're going to do?
Well, they're going to come in and there's, just like we've had
If
many
they come
times
in
with
with
a
an
gun.
AK-47, nothing that's going to stop that bullet, except the body.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
So you're saying there is no defense against that? I guess I'm trying to think of what. Are there any responsibilities of the church leadership different than the people that are sitting in the pews?
Well, they're not the government. They're not the government. I mean, we don't have the right to, because we're leadership, to arrest somebody and have a gun to shoot a criminal, where the police do, but we don't. Because of the things that have happened in our country, how many church shootings have there been in the last 5 years, perhaps? How many?
Too many.
Yeah, well, how many?
Probably a dozen.
I don't think there's been that many. I think there's 5. I think there's more than that.
5.
Church shootings?
5.
5?
5. I look at the statistics, it's 5.
Statistics, Brian saying are 5. So how many churches are there in the United States?
Thousands.
Okay. So the odds of something happening are really small, very small. What should churches do? Well, there are churches that have come up with some policies to handle this. I think that churches should do what Jay said first, which is to have a godly attitude and to live out your Christianity and your faith in the Lord and not worry about these things. I really do. I don't think we should worry about these things. If it happens, then I do believe God's going to show you what to do when it happens. And He may put it on several of our hearts to do the 9/11, let's roll, everybody charge at one time, the first 6 are going to die. But maybe 7th or 8th one in line, I'll be 12th. We'll make it there in time to stop the person. Maybe that's what happened. And I don't think that we can then set up a plan to say, and I know you're not asking us, but set a plan to say, okay, well, who are going to be the volunteers to jump in line first and just start running down the aisle like a person? I think, again, God's going to show us what to do if that should happen.
I think God showed Don and Jean on the airplane.
Don and Jean are a good example.
Don and Jean are such a good example.
But I am convinced he never ran down that aisle because he couldn't run. I'm convinced they did what they were trained to do, which is to share the Lord with the people next to them, because they never even called home.
No.
They were probably busy praying with other people.
Yes.
But the point is that I think Jay had a lot of wisdom in what he said, which is live your life for the Lord. Don't live in fear. Don't worry. Don't live in fear. Now there are churches that do have in line certain things, and there are churches that do have people that are licensed to be able to carry a gun in their church carrying a gun. They do have that. And they do have, and then there are churches that do have where the law allows individuals to carry a gun, such as in Virginia. We have a relative as a church who's at a church in Virginia. I told you before. The pastor is packing while he's in the pulpit. He stands in the pulpit with a gun on his side. And there are people in them. Now, because they have that, they have a policy of what to do. They had people come in and show them how to go to evacuate one room at a time, to go through. They had people that know which one goes low, which one goes high when you shoot into a room. They go. Well, the reason they go through all that is because they got guns. They want to do that. But if you don't have the guns to begin with, you can't do that. Doesn't work with your finger. But so other policies have to be in play. And a policy can just be, we're just going to trust the Lord and not worry about it. Because the odds of it happening are very, very, very minuscule. When you think of how many churches there are. Let's say it's 100. It's not, but let's say it was 100. 100 compared to hundreds of thousands of churches. It's just not something to worry about. And here's where, and I get in trouble with Christians, here's where my belief in the sovereignty of God comes in. Which is, I trust Him for all things. And if in His providence, He's going to have us meet Him that way, then that's how we're going to do it. I want to be a testimony. See, I think the greatest testimony was what happened after the gunfight in South Carolina. It wasn't a gunfight, man was shooting people.
Yeah.
But after that pyramid, was the attitude of the people in that church
Yes.
towards the shooter, and how that became just something that the news media could not comprehend.
Right.
They couldn't understand. In fact, they stopped asking them because they didn't want to hear anymore. The same thing happened with the school shooting in the Amish country with the Mennonites and the Amish, where they took the man's family who did the shooting and they brought them food and stuff and took care of them. And this became, so odd. This glorifies God.
The Lord says, I will guide you along this pathway through your life. I will advise you and watch over you.
So I think Jay and Angie's got the best solution. You don't? I do. I think that I have the biggest solution. Don't give in to fear.
How many times does He tell us?
Jonathan has a solution. Let's hear Jonathan. We'll put his in the mix.
I just don't agree with the you'll know in the moment what to do, right? Because what if in the moment you realize I should have bought a gun 5 years ago, right?
I don't think that's in the moment. That doesn't compute.
Just you get peace when you need it.
Right, you get peace when you need it, but you also prepare, right? You prepare for a fire, you prepare for a flood.
See, but I would prepare for an invader by saying, I got a cell phone to call the police, and I got faith in the Lord, and I'm going to let the Lord show me what to do if that should happen in my house. I have any problem waiting upon God for that. No problem.
Just so your cell phone is not dead.
Ryan?
I believe it has to do with basically your level of faith, where you are at that time. From my own personal experiences, like you said, fear. I was a very fearful person. I lived that way, and I lived, how would you say, defensive for many years. Now my level of faith is different. And I've been I really shouldn't be here, a lot of stuff I've been through. And I was very defensive then. Now I think of it differently. I waste too much time in my head. My head, that's all I would think about constantly, no matter where I was. Like, be on the defense. Always looking over my shoulder, always looking at situations, and, just waste too much time in my head. Now where my level of faith is, I really don't have any fear. What's going to happen is going to happen. That's how I feel now. But back in the days, I didn't live like that, and it wasn't a good way to live. And I'm just, speaking from
So
myself.
faith has increased your
faith, yeah,
has
not
changed
living
your
in
view.
fear. Yes.
Good. Well, we haven't solved all things, haven't answered all questions. hopefully we've given you some things to think about. But I do think that the bottom line is you got to glorify God. You got to glorify God. And I don't think you should fear anyone, what they can do to you, because they can't touch your soul. I think that's the big thing. What do you do from there? Pay your money, take the choice. We have in our government, in our state, you're allowed to buy one if you're approved. If you buy one, be sure you have considered what you would do with it. Craig went to school to make weapons.
Yep. I do not have one in my house to defend myself. I prefer target shooting, hunting, but and they're locked away in the in the attic there. They are inaccessible at all times.
Does Michael want you to have one?
Michael's a police officer,
Yes.
and I think you have to deal with that profession as a profession.
Yeah, because then you're supposed to be on call 24/7 as far as to answer to responsibility.
There's a duty that goes along with being a police officer.
Okay, you're all dismissed. We'll get some coffee and hopefully nobody get in a fight.